If anyone tells you to come to a nightclub that gives out free drinks and money, run. In Lagos, they say when the rich start handing out free money in a club, it's not charity, it's sacrifice. Martin thought his luck had finally changed. They said free money, free drinks. But by sunrise, one of them was in a grave and the other was in a hospital. Beware of nightclubs. When the lights go out, the spirits eats. Martin was 26 years old, but his body had already started to forget what hope felt like. Every morning, for the past 8 months, he would wake up in his mother's small sitting room in Lagos, and the first thing he would do was check his phone, refreshing his email, scrolling through job sites, hoping that someone, anyone, would see his qualifications and think he was worth hiring. His certificate from the Polytechnic hung on the wall like a beautiful lie. Everyone had told him it would open doors. It had only opened a door to disappointment. His friend Bola was having the same nightmare, except Bola was angrier about it. They had been friends since secondary school, the kind of friendship where you don't need to explain yourself because the other person already understands the weight you carry. Bola's anger was different though. It burned hot and fast like petrol catching fire. Martin, my guy, Bola said one evening as they sat on the crumbling fence outside Martin's compound, passing a cigarette between them. I'm tired of this life, you know. We finished school, we have certificates, we have sense, yet we're here watching ourselves waste away like bananas in the sun. Martin did not respond immediately. He was watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, beautiful and tragic, like everything in Lagos. The city was alive with noise, generators humming, car horns blaring, people shouting, but he felt completely still inside, like a photograph of himself rather than the real thing. What can we do? Martin finally answered, and even as the words left his mouth, he hated how defeated they sounded. Even the big companies are not hiring. Even people with connections are struggling. It was true. Their families had done everything they could. Martin's mother sold vegetables at the market, her back bent from years of standing in the sun. Bola's father was a security guard who came home every evening too tired to speak. Both families had sacrificed everything for their education, believing it would be their ticket out of poverty. Instead, they were now watching their sons return to the same place of struggle, like water returning to the ocean. That night, as Martin lay on his thin mattress, listening to the sounds of the Lagos night, the stray dogs fighting, the night traders calling out their goods, someone's child crying in a nearby room, he felt something dangerous taking root in his chest. It was a feeling he recognized but had been trying to push away. Desperation. Desperation is a clever thing. It doesn't feel like weakness at first. It feels like freedom. The next morning, Bola arrived at Martin's house earlier than usual, his eyes shining with something Martin couldn't name. It was neither hope nor excitement. It was something sharper. Brother, I'm going somewhere tonight and I want you to come with me, Bola said, and there was an energy in his voice that made Martin sit up and pay attention. There's a place, a nightclub, very big, very fine. They call it the Velvet Room. Martin had heard whispers about the Velvet Room. Everyone in Lagos had. It was the kind of place that existed in stories, where the rich men drove their cars with tinted windows, where music played so loud you could feel it in your bones, where anything could happen and everything was permitted. It was a place for people like them to only dream about from a distance, like staring through a glass window at a feast you could never taste. We don't have money to enter that kind of place, Martin said, but even as he said it, he was wondering if it was true. Bola smiled, a smile that would later seem important to remember, like the smile right before everything changes. That's the thing, my brother. That's the beautiful thing about the Velvet Room, Bola said, stepping closer. They say the owners and the rich men who come there, they hand out free drinks, free money too. Just like that, no strings attached. They just give it to people, random people. Martin felt his heart do something strange in his chest, a mixture of hope and fear, like standing at the edge of a cliff and wondering if the water below would catch you or destroy you. Free money, Martin repeated, and the words felt strange in his mouth. In his 26 years of life, he had learned that nothing was ever free. Everything had a cost. But maybe, just maybe, he thought, maybe this time was different. Before we continue with Martin's story, If you are enjoying this tale, please subscribe to this channel. In Lagos, we have a saying, a story that travels alone gets tired. This story needs your eyes, your ears, your heart. Subscribe so you never miss another chapter of this journey. The next part is where everything changes and you won't want to miss it. That same evening, as the sun began to sink below the Lagos skyline, Martin found himself wearing his best shirt, the one he saved for important occasions, and walking towards the part of the city he had only heard about in conversations. Bola walked beside him, talking constantly, his words tumbling out like water from a broken pipe. "I'm telling you, Martin, tonight is our night. I can feel it. Tonight, God is finally going to remember us. Tonight, we're going to eat like the people we see driving in big cars." But as Martin walked, there was a small voice inside his head, small but persistent, asking him questions. Where does this money come from? Why would rich men just give it away? What do they get in return? He pushed that voice down. He was tired of listening to the voice of caution. The voice of caution had never fed him. The voice of caution had never stopped his mother's back from bending. The voice of caution had only made him feel smaller. Sometimes, the smallest decisions change everything. The velvet room was nothing like Martin had imagined, and everything like his nightmares. From the outside, it was intimidating. A long black building with windows painted over so you couldn't see inside. There were men in dark suits standing at the entrance, the kind of men whose shoulders looked like they could carry the weight of entire buildings. But as Martin and Bola approached, something unexpected happened. The men smiled and waved them through, not even asking for money or checking their names. Once inside, Martin's senses exploded all at once. The music was so loud, it felt like it was vibrating inside his skull. Red and blue light flashed across the faces of hundreds of people. Beautiful people, rich-looking people, people who seemed to exist in a completely different world from the one Martin came from. The smell hit him next. Expensive perfume, mixed with sweat, alcohol, and something else he couldn't identify. The air felt thick, almost liquid, like he was swimming rather than walking. And then there were the dancers, men and women moving their bodies in ways that made Martin's stomach feel strange and tight. He had never seen anything like this. In his neighborhood, you didn't see women dancing like this, moving like water, like fire, like they owned the night themselves. "Come on," Bola shouted into his ear, grabbing his arm. "Come on, let's find a spot." They pushed through the crowd, Martin feeling like a ghost moving through a dream, until they reached a corner near the edge of the dance floor. That's when Martin first saw him. The man appeared suddenly, like he had materialized from the smoke itself. He was tall, dressed in a suit so expensive, it probably cost more than Martin's family made in a year. His smile was wide and white, and his eyes were the color of coffee, warm-looking, inviting, dangerous. "Hey, young brothers," the man said, his voice smooth like honey poured over glass. "First time at the Velvet Room?" Bola nodded excitedly, like a child being offered candy. Martin didn't say much, but something in his chest was tight, like a fist clenching around his heart. "Welcome, welcome," the man said, and he clapped his hands twice. Immediately, a waiter appeared carrying a tray of drinks. "Drink, celebrate, you are among friends here." The man handed each of them a glass filled with something golden and sparkling. It looked expensive. It looked like the kind of thing people in movies drank at parties in countries Martin had only seen on television. "What's your name, brother?" Martin asked the man, finding his voice. The man's smile widened, but something flickered in his eyes, a moment of shadow, like a cloud passing in front of the sun. "My name is not important," he said. "What is important is that you enjoy yourself. Drink, have fun. Tonight, the money flows like water here." Bola didn't hesitate. He brought the glass to his lips and drank deeply, and Martin watched his friend's eyes light up with pleasure. The music seemed to get louder, the lights seemed to flash brighter, and suddenly, Martin found himself wondering, why not? Why not drink? Why not try to enjoy something just once in his miserable life? He brought the glass to his lips. The taste was sweet, almost too sweet, like he was hiding something underneath the sugar. There was a slight bitterness at the end, something that didn't belong there. But Bola was already laughing, already moving, already being absorbed into the crowd, and Martin didn't want to be the one standing alone. He drank. For a while,
Martin couldn't tell how long, because time seemed to work differently inside the velvet room. Everything was wonderful. The music seemed to make sense. The light seemed beautiful. The people dancing seemed wise and happy. His body felt light, like he could float. His mind felt quiet, like all the noise and worry that usually live there had finally found a place to rest. More drinks appeared. More men in expensive suits approached them, smiling, talking about opportunities and money and how successful young men like Martin and Bola deserved to enjoy themselves. Cash was pressed into their hands, actual naira notes, real money, and Martin felt something he hadn't felt in months, a sense of belonging, a sense of being wanted.
Around them, the party continued. The dancers moved, the music pumped, the lights flashed, and somewhere inside his head, Martin was aware that something wasn't right, that something about this night didn't make sense, that the feeling in his stomach wasn't quite excitement, but something close to fear. But he pushed it away. He didn't want to think. He just wanted to feel good. That's when he noticed Bola starting to move strangely. At first, Martin thought his friend was just dancing, just getting into the music. But then he saw that Bola's movements were uncontrolled, jerky, like his body didn't quite belong to him anymore. Bola's head was tilted back, and his eyes had a strange quality to them, not really seeing, not really present. "Bola?" Martin called out, but Bola didn't respond. Martin tried to move closer to his friend, but the crowd seemed to push him away. He was fighting through bodies, through music, through the thick smoke that seemed to fill the air with each passing second. His head was pounding now, and the pleasant feeling from before had turned into something else, something darker, something that made his skin prickle with warning. That's when he saw the man with the kind eyes again, the coffee-colored eyes. The man was standing near Bola, and he was holding his arm. And in his other hand, Martin saw something glint, something small and silver and sharp. Martin's mind, foggy as he was, finally understood what he was seeing. Horror crashed into him like a wave. But before he could move, before he could shout, before he could do anything at all, the world went black. Martin woke up in a hospital. The first thing he became aware of was the smell, that particular smell of hospitals that no amount of cleaning can remove, a smell that speaks of illness and fear and the edge between life and death. The second thing was pain. His head felt like it had been split open and put back together wrong. His mouth tasted like copper and ash. He opened his eyes slowly, and the world came into focus in pieces. White ceiling, white walls, a window with bars on it. For a moment, he thought he was in prison, and that seemed to make a strange kind of sense, given everything that had happened. "He's awake," a voice said, a woman's voice, soft and concerned and familiar. His mother's face appeared above him, and Martin saw something in her eyes that broke his heart. She was looking at him like she was seeing a ghost, like he had come back from somewhere very far away. "Mama," his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Thank God, thank God, thank God," his mother said, and she was crying, her tears falling onto his face. "My son, you have given me a fright that will shorten my life. Do you understand? Do you understand what happened?" Martin tried to sit up, but the world spun dangerously and he fell back onto the pillow. A nurse appeared, a woman with a stern face and efficient hands, and she gently placed a cool cloth on his forehead. "Rest," the nurse said. "Your friend didn't make it." The word took a moment to penetrate his fog-covered mind. When they did, it was like someone had pushed him off a cliff. "What?" he whispered. Martin's mother made a sound like an animal wounded, a sound like a mother whose child has died. She gripped his hand so tightly it hurt. "Bola," she said, her voice breaking. "My son, Bola, they found him in the street, near that nightclub. His heart had stopped. When they brought you to the hospital, you were barely breathing. You had a mark on your neck, like something had been pierced into your skin." Martin's hand went to his neck automatically. There was a bandage there, and underneath it a dull ache. He touched it gently, and memories began to come back. Not clear, not in order, but fragments. The music, the lights, the sweet-tasting drink, the moment when everything had gone wrong. Over the next 3 days, as Martin lay in the hospital bed and his strength slowly returned, he learned what had happened.
A security guard doing his rounds had found Bola collapsed in an alley behind the velvet room. At first, they thought he had overdosed, that he had taken drugs and his body couldn't handle it. But the police investigation that followed revealed something else entirely. When they tested Martin's blood, they found traces of a substance that had been used to make him unconscious. And on his neck, where that tiny mark was, there were puncture wounds, marks that looked like they had been made by a very thin needle. The police began asking questions. They asked Martin over and over, "What did you see? Who approached you? What exactly did you drink?" But Martin couldn't remember. His memories of that night were like trying to hold water in his hands. The more he tried to grasp them, the more they slipped away. He remembered the man with the coffee-colored eyes. He remembered Bola's body moving strangely. He remembered the feeling of wrongness, but the details, the crucial details that might have helped the police, those were gone. What he did know was that Bola was gone. His best friend, the person who had walked beside him through poverty and disappointment, was dead. And Martin was alive, but for what purpose? To live with the guilt? To live knowing that if he hadn't gone to that nightclub, if he hadn't been tempted by the promise of free money and free drinks, Bola would still be breathing? The guilt was heavier than any physical pain. When the police finally questioned him properly, he learned more details that made his blood run cold. They had arrested several people connected to the velvet room. The man with the coffee-colored eyes was named Kofi, and he had been arrested on suspicion of involvement in something the newspapers were calling ritual activities. The police officer explaining this to Martin was a woman named Detective Nena, and she had kind eyes but a tired face. She sat down next to his hospital bed and explained carefully like she was talking to a child. The nightclub, Detective Nena said, it wasn't just a place for people to party. The owners, they belong to a group, a secret group. They believe in things, old things, dark things. They use what they collect from intoxicated visitors for their ceremonies. "What do you mean, collect?" Martin asked, but part of him already knew. "Blood," Detective Nena said simply. "They take blood. Your friend's body showed signs that they had taken a large quantity. His heart, already weakened by whatever they had put in his drink, couldn't handle it." Martin felt the room tilt. He remembered being on the edge of the dance floor. He remembered Bola's body going rigid. He remembered the man with the coffee-colored eyes standing nearby with something that glinted in the light. That something had been a needle. That something had been draining the life out of his best friend. And Martin was too intoxicated, too trapped in his own desperate need for an escape to stop it. When Martin was released from the hospital 2 weeks later, he was a different person. His mother brought him home, and he went back to sleeping in the sitting room, back to the same small space where his story had begun, but everything felt different now. The walls that seemed cramped before now felt suffocating. The sounds of the neighborhood that had once been comforting now sounded like they were mocking him.
In the mornings, he would wake up and the first thing he would think was, "Bola is dead because of me, because I wanted money, because I wanted to escape, because I was weak." He stopped looking for jobs. What was the point? He might not have held the needle, but he had walked into that nightclub willingly. He had drunk the drink. He had distracted Bola with his presence instead of stopping him from making the same mistake. He was as guilty as the men they had arrested. His mother tried to talk to him. She would place food in front of him that he wouldn't eat. She would sit beside him and try to start conversations that he couldn't finish. He could see the worry eating her alive, making her age faster than time should allow, but he couldn't make himself care. Self-pity had wrapped around him like a chain, and he had no strength to break it. 3 months after Bola's death, Martin was sitting outside the compound one evening when Bola's mother came to see him. Mama Bola was a small woman, worn down by life and now broken by tragedy in a way that didn't seem repairable. She sat down next to Martin without being invited, and for a long time she said nothing. They just sat in silence as the sun set. Finally, she spoke. "They told me you survived," she said quietly. "They told me you were there when my son took his last breath, even if you didn't know it at the time. I wanted to hate you for that. I wanted to blame you." Martin couldn't look at her. He felt tears starting to come, but he held them back. He didn't deserve tears. He didn't deserve sadness. He deserved punishment. But my son loved you, Mama Bola continued, and her voice cracked. He talked about you constantly, about how you were his brother, about how you two would make it out of poverty together. He chose to go to that nightclub that night, Martin. You didn't force him. We don't get to decide what happens to other people. We only get to decide what we do with our own lives. She reached over and took his hand. Her hand was small and rough from years of work, and her grip was surprisingly strong. My son is gone, and that is a pain that will never leave me. But adding more sorrow to this world, more waste, that's not honoring his memory. If you perish sitting here in your pity, then 2 young men will have been lost, and for nothing. She stood up to leave, moving slowly like her bones hot. She said, "Your friend deserves better. He deserves for you to live, really live, not just exist like a ghost in your mother's sitting room. Live, Martin. If you won't do it for yourself, do it for him." After Mama Bola left, Martin sat in the darkness for a long time, and something began to shift inside him. Not quickly, not completely, but like the first movement of a plant pushing through soil towards the sun.
The change didn't happen all at once. It happened in small steps, like climbing stairs in the dark, feeling for each step before putting your weight on it. First, Martin started eating. His mother noticed and her face showed relief so complete it broke Martin's heart. He was killing her with his despair, and he was finally understanding that. Then he started to go outside during the day. He would sit outside the compound and watch people pass, going to work, going to school, going about their lives, and he would feel something like envy, but also something like understanding. Everyone had burdens, everyone had pain, but everyone kept moving. After 2 more months, something happened that Martin didn't expect. The police contacted him again. Detective Nena came to his house with news. They had built a strong case against the people connected to the Velvet Room, and they wanted Martin to testify in court. Would he do it? Would he be willing to stand up and tell what he had seen that night? Martin's first instinct was to say no. He couldn't go back to that part of the city. He couldn't face those people. He was terrified. But then he thought about Bola. He thought about all the other young people like them who were desperate, who were hungry, who were looking for a way out of poverty. He thought about how many more might end up in that nightclub, how many more might not wake up in a hospital bed. "I'll do it," he told Detective Nena. "Even though your memories are not clear?" the detective asked. "Even though," Martin said, "because what I do remember is real, and Bola's death is real, and that has to mean something." Preparing for court was difficult. Martin had to meet with lawyers and go over his testimony again and again. He had to describe that night in detail, and each time he did, he was transported back there. Back to the music and the lights and the feeling of something being terribly wrong. But each time, it got a little easier. Each time, he felt a little stronger. Because he was doing something. He was fighting back against the darkness. In the courtroom, Martin stood before everyone and told his story. He described the man with the coffee-colored eyes. He described the sweet-tasting drinks. He described watching his best friend's body begin to fail while he was too intoxicated to help. He described the needle mark on his own neck when he woke up. His voice shook, his hands shook, but he got through it. The prosecution had other evidence, medical evidence, testimonies from other survivors, records from inside the Velvet Room. When all the pieces came together, the picture was undeniable. The nightclub was not just a place for people to party. It was a hunting ground for a group of people who believed in rituals and were willing to hurt others to practice them. Kofi, the man with the coffee-colored eyes, was convicted along with 7 other people. They received long prison sentences. When the verdict came down, Martin felt something he didn't expect to feel. Not joy, but a kind of peace. Not happiness, but a sense that something had been corrected, that justice had been served, and that Bola's death had not been in vain. That night, Martin sat with his mother and she held his hand like she used to do when he was young. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "I'm proud of my son." And for the first time since that terrible night, Martin cried. Not tears of despair, but tears of release, like rain washing something clean. 2 years later, Martin stood in the small office of a community organization called Second Chances, and he was training new volunteers. His official title was Youth Outreach Coordinator, and the work he did was simple but important. He met with young people in the poorer parts of Lagos, people like he used to be, people who were desperate and hungry and looking for a way out of poverty. He listened to their stories, he understood their pain, and most importantly, he showed them a different way forward. The organization started when a woman named Rita, a social worker who had been involved in his case, approached him with an idea. She had seen the transformation in him. She had seen how the broken young man in the hospital bed had become someone who could help others. She asked him if he would consider using his experience to keep other young people from making the same mistakes. At first, Martin said no. He didn't think he had anything to offer. But Rita was persistent, and eventually, Martin had agreed just to try. Just one session, just one group of young people. That first session, he was terrified. His hands shook as he stood in front of a room full of teenagers and young adults, all of them looking at him with curious eyes. He had prepared a speech, practiced the words, but when he opened his mouth, what came out was not a speech at all. It was his story, all of it. The desperation, the temptation, the terrible night, the guilt, the grief, the slow climb back to something that resembled life. When he finished, there was silence. Then one young man, a boy who couldn't have been more than 18, raised his hand. "So you are saying that the easy way, the quick way, that's never the real way," the boy said slowly. Martin thought about this. He thought about the money he had received that night at the Velvet Room. He thought about how good it had felt for those few hours before everything collapsed. He thought about all the money in the world not being worth a single moment with his best friend. "Yes," Martin said. "I'm saying that the real way is harder. It takes longer. It doesn't feel like luck or magic, but it's the only way that doesn't cost you your life." Word spread. Young people started to come to listen to Martin speak. More organizations reached out. Other survivors of dangerous situations began joining the program. Martin found himself working with people who had experienced trafficking, exploitation, and abuse. He found himself helping people who were exactly where he had been, at the bottom of a well, looking up at a small circle of sky, wondering if they would ever climb out again. One day, 2 years into his work at Second Chances, a young woman came to one of his sessions. Her name was Neka, and she was quiet and cautious, like someone who had learned not to trust easily. After the session, she approached him. "I almost went to the Velvet Room," she told him quietly. "My friend told me about it, told me about the free money. I was ready to go. Then I saw your story on a video someone shared, and I didn't go." Martin felt something inside him shift. In that moment, all the pain he had carried, all the guilt, all the darkness, it suddenly had meaning. Because this young woman standing in front of him was alive, she was safe, and it was because he had chosen to speak about his experience. "Thank you for telling me that," he said to Neka. "Really, thank you." "No," Neka said, "thank you for not giving up, for staying alive." 6 months later, Martin was offered a promotion. The organization wanted him to develop an entire program around predatory nightclubs and how to recognize danger. They wanted him to travel to schools and community centers across Lagos and beyond, telling his story, warning young people about the tactics used by those who wanted to exploit them. On the day he started this new position, Martin visited Bola's grave for the first time in a long while. He brought flowers, bright yellow flowers that reminded him of happiness and possibility. "I'm doing it, brother," he said quietly, standing at the grave. "I'm living, not just for me, for you too. And I'm going to make sure that what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else if I can help it." As Martin stood there in the afternoon sun, he thought about the boy he had been 2 years ago, desperate, hungry, so ready to believe in easy answers that he had been willing to ignore all the warning signs. He didn't blame that boy. He understood him. He pitied him. But he was grateful he was no longer him. Martin had learned that sometimes the greatest power we have is the power to take our pain and transform it into something that helps others. Sometimes the way forward is not through forgetting what happened to us, but through remembering it fully and then choosing to be different because of it. The nightclub world still existed in Lagos. There were probably other secret organizations, other hunters looking for prey. Martin knew he couldn't save everyone, but he could save some. And he could look every young person who listened to his story in the eye and say truthfully, "I survived, I changed."
And so can you. Dear listener, dear watcher, if you are in a situation where someone is offering you money, opportunity, or luxury that feels too good to be true, it is. The world is full of predators who know exactly which buttons to push, exactly what words to say to people like us who are struggling. But your life is worth more than any amount of money. When you see the warning signs, that feeling in your stomach that something isn't right, that small voice telling you to be careful, listen to it. That voice is not your enemy. That voice is your friend trying to save your life. If you have reached this point in our story, I ask you to subscribe to this channel. Stories like Martin's need to be heard. They need to be shared. Subscribe so that we can continue to bring you real stories about real struggles that could save someone's life, maybe even your own. The more we share these stories, the fewer young people will fall into these traps. Your subscription is an investment in the safety of our community. Until the next story, stay safe, stay aware.